If you haven't read or watched My Hero but you're a fan of good character writing and storytelling, watch My Hero. This show has some of the best writing and characterization that I've seen just across all shows that I've watched. Like, the reason why this guy is on screen is because he is quite literally one of the best written characters in all of Shonen Jump. I haven't seen like all of media either, but I would even go as far to say he's just one of the best characters I've seen on TV. Which is wild, because I started off hating this dude. And you'll notice that a lot when you're watching and reading My Hero. Because a lot of these characters, I'll say, are like perfectly flawed. There'll be some people on the side of good that you're like, why is he on the good side? He's terrible. Then you'll learn more about that character and be like, man, what a complicated past. And you'll get the same thing for some of the villains on the villain side. You got villains that just deal with racism and that's why they're doing what they're doing right now. Villains that were abandoned by their parents and were never given therapy to deal with the quirk that they have that changes the way that their brain operates. And now they're on the run in society, even though deep down they ain't nothing but a teenage girl. You'll see characters that are like the bully of bullies, and then as you get to know them more, you end up seeing that they were actually suffering from an inferiority complex, and that's why they were lashing out the way that they were. And it doesn't matter if they're on the side of good or bad. Usually with these characters, once they learn their ways were wrong, they end up trying to do better. Because ultimately, this show is just about everybody trying to become the best version of themselves that society will allow, ergo, their version of a hero. So you'll get situations where even like some of the villains have their shining moments because they're being a hero to somebody else. Nobody on the side of good, but in their own little circle, they are each other's heroes. So a lot of the time in this series, it's less of like having that guy just be an evil dude that we need to stop, and it's more of a clash of ideals. I mean, this dude is just evil, but he's one of the best evil villains I've ever seen. But it's through All For One that the main story of the show is showcased. Because due to a lot of the corrupt stuff that you see in Hero Society, villains like these end up being born. And they're not born to any fault of their own because Toga, Twice, Shigaraki, and even Dabi were all just initial victims. Even Spinner, everybody here was just a victim of society that is now trying to fight back against it. And the scary thing about that is when you get a bunch of people like that under one roof, they'll rally behind anybody, including a demon lord. If Hero Society wasn't so corrupt, he wouldn't have the pawns to use to do the things that he wanted to do. So as you end up going through My Hero, you'll see that the two biggest villains in the entire story are him, All For One, and the second one is Hero Society. I know Shigaraki's one of the main villains too. It's just the thing about him is that he's created by Hero Society and All For One unknowingly working together. Everything wrong about the world of My Hero led to the creation of the biggest villain in human history. And he happens to be my favorite villain of all time now. So if you enjoy any of my takes on My Hero and you have not seen this show, read it or watch it. It is definitely worth. Personally, I would recommend reading it just because Horikoshi's artwork is that good, but you could do whatever you want. Alright, look, I don't have a bad take just because I like Endeavor and I think his actions have made up for what he did in the past. Personally, I think it's a bad take to think that he's irredeemable. Because all across anime, we have seen people that were way more irredeemable than him, yet they are loved by their communities to this day. Let's name a couple. OG example, Vegeta. This dude pulls up, kills half of Goku's friends, and then goes to planet Namek and murders like half of their species. Then he comes back to Earth, bangs Goku's best friend, cucking his other friend, and now he's just one of the gang. And from that moment on, Vegeta just became part of our normal DBZ lexicon, and he is seen as this amazing character. He's done all this good. He's no longer bad anymore. He even died at the end of the Buu Saga and he got a little halo, despite having plenty of bodies under his belt. How about somebody like L that uses death row inmates as just collateral to do whatever he wants to do? Were they put on death row for a valid reason, or were they an innocent person put on death row like Marcellus Williams? Who knows? He's not thinking about that though. He's just using their lives as a means to an end. I would find that action pretty irredeemable. But L is a character that everybody loves and respects. Itachi. Now, I don't like Itachi. Well, I don't dislike him, but I really don't like his fans because y'all are crazy. So many people love this dude and think that he's like this great brother despite the fact that he killed his parents, which also his 6-year-old brother's parents, and then you made him watch you kill them like 30 plus times in his own mind. He's 6. But later you're trying to tell him that you did all this for him and that you loved him. Like, miss me with that. Like, but y'all love him. Y'all love Itachi. He's not an irredeemable bastard. What about this dude? First mission, Soul Society. All right, you got to kill your sister. Execute her. Why? Because she was finna die on Earth, so she gave her power to somebody else so that they can save both of their lives. Sounds pretty logical, to save your own life. But yeah, this dude still decided to off his own sister for the sake of the mission. Now, buddy, I can never get behind that. He should have looked at them dudes and been like, don't ask me that again, and if you do, I'm gonna take you out instead. That's what I would have did. You ain't never gonna make me do that to my sister. But he is a fan favorite Bleach character. Now, going through memory lane, why is it a bad take for me to say that Endeavor redeemed himself for me in the story for everything that he did? Because he did do a lot bad, but then he did a lot good from season 4 onward, helping everybody. But he's an irredeemable bastard, and not the dude that killed his aunties, uncles, cousins, mom, dad, and then replayed that image in his brother's 6-year-old mind over and over again. This is why I can't take a lot of y'all opinions seriously. You can think I have a bad take. I think anybody that likes him is a bad take, but I'm not going to say it because you can like what you want to like. And I think when it comes to Endeavor, he has story writing that puts some Lifetime characters to shame. Now, if you're younger, you don't like him, I'll just say when you watch or read this series as you get older and some of these more nuanced story plot lines can grasp hold in your brain, I think you'll start to appreciate him more. It's like how as a kid, you'll probably watch Last Avatar and you love the adventures of Aang, Sokka, and Katara. But then as you get older, you're like, man, even though it's not as fun, the storyline with Zuko and Iroh is just so much better. That's how I feel when it comes to Endeavor and his family and the rest of My Hero Academia. It's still good, but he's one of the best parts about it. And personally, I just love that Endeavor was a bad person that worked his way into becoming a better person, and the story actually cared about it. Most of the time, they just end up good, and it's like, oh, I guess they're good now. Glad that did not happen here. Now, of course, with the end of My Hero, no one is saying that Endeavor is a perfect character. But personally, I feel like to see his entire story, where he started and where he ended, and still hate him is kind of crazy. Again, you can do what you want, but let's just go through the facts. Endeavor has done a lot of stuff to be hated for. But I don't think people hate him for the right reasons sometimes, because sometimes you attribute things to being Endeavor's fault that wasn't only his fault. For example, the whole quirk marriage thing with Ray, she agreed to this. And you can try to say she was only doing it for her family's sake, but it's still her agreeing to these terms. She knew what was going on. Both these people knew that when you mix quirks together, you might get a Frankenstein monster, yet they did it anyway, and then made Frankenstein's monster. People also like to hate on Endeavor because of what he did to Toya, but he didn't do too much to Toya. He tried to train him to be a hero. They seem to have a really good relationship for what it's worth up until whatever age this is. But then we know that he learns from the doctor that his body cannot handle the flames that he can output because his flames are hotter than Endeavor's, who has the hottest firepower in the world. Not even BSing, he has the highest firepower in the heat index in the world of My Hero Academia. Which means that both Dabi and Shoto had the highest firepower in the world of My Hero. That's why nobody could stop Dabi but Shoto. But back to everything else. Because Endeavor does actually try to plead and get Toya to realize hey, you burn yourself when you use this firepower. You don't gotta be a hero. There's a lot of other stuff you can do, and he just didn't want to do that. Now you can say well, it's part of Endeavor's fault for doing that, but yes and no. The no part comes in because Toya was just naturally way more stubborn than even Endeavor, and that's a level of stubborn that I don't think any 5-year-old or whatever should have. So nothing that Endeavor could say or Toya's mom could say would get that dude to stop burning himself with this quirk. And extreme measures calls for extreme solutions, because then Endeavor was well, if we have a child that can do the thing he's trying to do, maybe he'll stop doing that thing and burning himself. Ray kind of thinks it's crazy because it does sound kind of crazy, but the situation is already kind of screwed. So it's go big or go home, I guess. And for the people that can't read between the lines, I'm not saying this was a good idea. All I'm saying is they were in such a bad place right now as a family that he was willing to do any crazy idea that came into his head to keep his son from burning himself. So while I fault Endeavor for doing this, I don't fault him for why he wanted to do it, because at the end of the day, he wasn't even thinking about the #1 hero so much right now. Well, he was, but he was mainly thinking about this as a way to get Toya to stop burning himself. This was a means to an end. Then ultimately, when he saw that Dabi awaken Ray's quirk, he then took full responsibility because he realized that, all of this was a self-fulfilling prophecy that he unintentionally made. Because Toya was never going to be able to do what he wanted him to do unless he was on the verge of death to awaken Ray's quirk. But the only way he would get himself close to death would be to burn himself alive. So this moment was to showcase to Endeavor, this is what you wanted, right? right here, standing before you, trying to kill you, is what you did everything for, and was it worth it? Clearly here, Endeavor sees it wasn't worth it because he's willing to die along with him. Before Ray and the rest of the family pulled up, and then we had that like really sad emotional moment. Which after all of it, Endeavor's like covered in third-degree burns from head to toe. He can barely walk anymore, if walk at all. Missing an arm, had a chunk taken out of his side, just like how All Might did. All after fighting to save the world in 2 wars that happened in the span of like a couple of months. His family finally came back together, and none of them seemed to actually hate him. And I would even go as far to say that none of them ever hated him. Even when Natsu just tries to hate on Endeavor, the wife, the one that was beat, is like, you wrong, he does still care about us, even if he has like a weird way of showing it. And even Natsu sees that now, because at this point where they all meet up to go to the hospital, Natsu looks at Endeavor and he's like, you know what, you kind of cool now. So basically what I'm saying is, if the family that all the bad stuff happened to can find it in their heart to forgive him because they see everything he's done to atone himself, they seen everything that he went through in this process of atoning for himself, and they were also there through the entire thing to know that, yeah, Toya was kind of like a tap kid from jump. Like, both of us were responsible for bringing him into this world, but neither of us knew that he was going to be just, mentally unchecked like that. So to a degree, Ray and everybody else knew like all of it didn't fall solely on Endeavor. They all knew that some was a little bit off about Toya. And that thing that's off about Toya is his way of dealing with things, because Shoto brings that up to him when they first fight in the second war. He's like, look, I may be your little brother, but let me tell you this. Our dad was crazy as freak. Our family was super screwed up, but guess what? You chose to be a mass murderer. I chose to be a hero. You could have picked a better life and you didn't. So long story short, all I'm saying is Endeavor is at fault for some of the things that he did. Now, I think he didn't do anything as bad as a lot of other anime characters that are, literal murderers that are loved by their community, yet Endeavor still gets hate. But it's also understanding that Toya was his own person that chose to not do good things. Endeavor didn't make him that way. He made himself that way. Endeavor and Ray did bring him into the world though, and they did bring him to this world with that messed up mission of surpassing All Might, which is why his brain got a little bit warped. But you can't tell a kid to like give themselves 3rd-degree burns and tell them to keep doing it. That's what he was doing though. So that alone should just let you know that he was never in the right state of mind. I'm just happy that at the end of the day, he got to say what he wanted to say to his family. Because as much as Toya was a villain and Endeavor was the one that started that Rolling Stone, they were both ultimately just victims. Victims that just didn't process their trauma well. Because Toya wasn't that bad, but Dabi became much worse after this dude came into the picture. And Endeavor's lust for power at a young age stems from the fact that he saw his father try to save a young girl, but he wasn't a good enough hero to do it, so they both just died. You might be a little obsessed with becoming the best if that's what happened to your parent that was a hero. And then from that point on, hurt people just hurt more people. And in this case, those people happen to be his family. So overall, I'm just glad that the hero of the family, Shoto, was there to bring it all back together and put a bow on this. Not a neat bow. Bow got some singes, but it's wrapped up. See, this is the point I was making with my Endeavor video. Like, you are literally in the comments right now trying to add justifications as to why Itachi murdered his whole clan. You doing some backflips right now to try to redeem that dude, and you see how easily everybody hates him, and he has not killed a single soul. And none of this is any offense. I just like that your comment is helping me prove my point. Because I got to attempt to justify Endeavor too. He knew that somebody needed to be the new #1 hero eventually, but the rest of the world, including Japan, was super complacent because they're just used to All Might taking care of everything. He was the only one putting in work. That's why he became #1 afterward. Like, could you imagine if Endeavor was a complacent person just like all the other heroes because of All Might? He would have died fighting Hood because he barely won with the help of Hawks, the #2 hero, while fighting at his peak all this time. Endeavor's just a really complex character that you can't paint him all good and you can't paint him all bad. And both those good and bad actions created one of the worst villains that the world's ever seen and one of the strongest heroes the world's ever seen too. Shoto was needed to save us in the first war, and he was needed to stop Dabi and do a lot of other stuff in the second one. Actually, let me level with you for a minute. So we can all identify that obviously this was bad. This dude was being abused while he was being trained, because you shouldn't be hitting a 5-year-old so hard anyway that they throwing up. I know, that's bad. But benefits did come from this, even if it was at the cost of Shoto, like childhood. Because if Enji never made him or trained him, he would not be here to save these guys versus Stain. Midoriya would have lived, but Native and Ida would have died. Which, by the way, he would have needed Ida in the future to help him save his family from Dabi. So if he was not trained enough to fight and hold off Stain so that this dude can get back up and not die, Shoto loses his whole family. All Might probably dies in season 1 because a really trained Shoto pulled up to save him from the Nomu that had him in a chokehold. Not a real chokehold, I know y'all take things too literal. After Midoriya and Shigaraki fought in the second war before All For One took over his body, it was Shoto that pulled up to save Endeavor from falling, Bakugo after he got stabbed, and Midoriya too. And I know we kind of moved from the general topic of the video, but the main thing I wanted to get across was, for some of the people that are like Endeavor's just irredeemable, understand that despite all the bad he did, the good that he did, bringing Shoto into this world and training him up, is the reason why we won overall. Without Shoto, My Hero Academia is a wildly different series. And it sucks what he had to go through to become that person, but I guess that's what other series or other things would call fate. Sometimes bad things will happen to you in your life, but it's up to you to turn those bad things that happen into something positive, which is what he did and what his brother ultimately did not.